Katie Pladle, then 18, was ecstatic to learn that her long-lost biological parents were the devoted family she had always imagined when she made contact with them again. However, in a few of months, that fantasy had descended into an unfathomable nightmare complete with an incestuous relationship and, at the end, the brutal murder of 3 defenseless people. Perhaps the most pressing question raised by the terrible case of Stephen Platel and his daughter Katie is how no one saw this coming. Please be advised that this is an instructional movie that discusses delicate topics such as child abuse, grooming, and incest. Before we begin, we would like to express our deepest sympathies to the families of everyone who was harmed by the horrible atrocities detailed in this case. This tale begins in 1995, when 15-year-old Alyssa Garcia and 20-year-old Stephen Platel connected in an internet chat room. Stephen was a well-known recluse at the time, residing in New York with his mother. Recalling him from previous school days, he was the person who was bullied and always wore the same hockey sweater. According to one classmate, he was an odd man.
You know, we never knew anything about it, but definitely you could say that it might be strange. The hockey jerseys, San Jose Sharks, I mean, every day. And we would be in same gym classes. They'd have different grades in the same gym class. And he was the type of kid that he would just never change for gym class. Super quiet, other than when he had his, a few friends around him. Something must have been off. How he was treated at home, or he was getting bullied in school. There's something had to be off to get his life to this spot, and then to take down all these other lives as well. And it's a really horrible, heartbreaking thing.
Alyssa, who was 15, was residing in San Antonio, Texas, with her parents. Afterwards, she would say that Stephen was actively grooming her. And their connection took a physical turn when he showed up at her home after flying across the nation to see her. Although Alyssa's parents disapproved, they felt powerless to stop it for some reason. After returning to New York, Stephen persuaded Alyssa to flee her house. Alyssa moved in with Stephen in New York when she was 16 years old, and she was expecting her first kid. Alyssa quickly became aware of the man's darker side after he had seduced her away from her family. In addition to being a recluse, Stephen Platel was also erratic, domineering, and violent. Too soon, Alyssa was estranged from her family and enmeshed in an abusive cycle from which she would never be able to break free.
He was verbally, emotionally, and mentally abusive throughout our 20 years together. He did do many violent things. He had nearly beaten to death one cat and did beat to death another cat. He would go long periods of time of not talking to his family. He was extremely isolated.
The advent of their little girl, Denise, did, predictably, nothing to improve the situation. Alyssa lavished affection on her new daughter, but Stephen was hesitant to give her food or give her a diaper change. What's even more concerning is that her sobbing sent him into fits of anger. Stephen took to pinching the baby until her tiny body was black and blue. When she cried, he would cover her mouth with his hand. There were also other darker things that happened.
I was worried about Katie's safety. She would cry and it would just instantly trigger him. He would curse, he would tell me to shut her the hell up. He would at times scoop her up and place her into a big cooler that we had. And then sometimes he would just shut it tight. He knew it was possible she could be dead and he was not fazed by it. So I would finally go back there and open it and get her out. He was a special kind of scary to me.
Alyssa later said, "I would just scoop her up and shut the bedroom door, and I would rock her back and forth and tell her how sorry I was for the life she was having." By the time the child was 8 months old, Alyssa said that she had a distinct kind of fear in Stephen's presence. She had to make the agonizing decision to put the baby up for adoption since his abuse was getting worse. She explained to her family that she was just not ready for a child and that her postpartum depression had made it difficult for her to manage. The lucky escape was that of baby Denise. She was given a new lease on life and given the name Katie Fusco after being adopted by Anthony and Kelly Fusco, a kind couple. Kelly worked as a secretary, and Anthony was an officer at the State Department of Corrections. The couple reared Katie in a loving home alongside their own biological daughter, leading a simple and steady existence in a trailer in Dover, a little town around 80 miles north of New York. Alyssa, on the other hand, experienced intense remorse and grief. She consented to marry Stephen in 2006 because she felt more reliant on him than ever. She recollects fantasizing of a picture-perfect married household and persuading herself that he could change. Rather, life would gradually degenerate into a horror house with Stephen. Alyssa and Stephen became parents to another baby girl, Katie Fusco, 9 years after baby Denise. A third girl was born 5 years later. Although erratic, Stephen appeared to be more capable of handling being a parent. The family had relocated to the Virginian suburb of Henrico. It seemed to Alyssa that the family could have turned the corner. But it was not to last. Because Stephen couldn't work consistently, Alyssa had to take on multiple occupations to support the family. He would punch holes in the wall and throw furniture during tantrums. He caught a neighboring cat in his garage and beat it twice. The second time, he beat it until it was dead and then threw it in a garbage bag and threw it in the trash. He had plenty of time on his hands, so he became obsessed with guns and gathered quite the collection. The family, however, was occupied with being cautious around him. Despite Alyssa's best efforts to keep her kids safe, she was compelled to leave them in his care due to her demanding work schedule. One day, she returned home to discover a trembling 3-year-old standing in the bathtub with her legs drenched in pee. She was made to stand there for hours as a penalty for arriving late to the bathroom. Alyssa tried to get away from him multiple times. In response, Stephen vowed to blow his brains out and make sure that it was recorded so that her and the kids could watch it later. Because Alyssa felt helpless, it seemed like a beautiful gift from the world when her long-lost daughter Denise, now known as Katie, friend requested her on social media in August 2015. When Alyssa discovered that her 17-year-old oldest daughter had been doing well in such a typical and secure home, she was overjoyed. She was a cheerleader at Dover High School and had given up meat because of her intense compassion for animals. Ironically, she had even started taking care of stray animals. She was creative and well known in the classroom for her outstanding comic strips. In a blog post, Katie discussed her passion for drawing and said, "A pen and something to draw on has become a safe place for me. My weapon of choice against laws and regulations became ink." In summary, life without art is, in my opinion, non-existent. She had big hopes for the future as well. She intended to study digital advertising at the State University of New York after attending a community college following graduation. With the exception of one minor problem, her life was practically ideal. Katie had a strong inner desire to learn the identities of her birth parents for a long time, so in the summer of 2017, she decided to search for them on Facebook. She discovered them both soon enough. She was shocked to find that her two biological sisters, who are now 11 and 7, were still living with her parents. They appeared to be a lovely, content family. Better yet, when she sent them a hesitant note introducing herself, they answered with enthusiasm. Before long, Katie was receiving regular correspondence from her parents, and arrangements were being made for her to visit them in Henrico. After Katie's high school graduation in June 2016, the Pladle family eventually got back together. Unrestrained happiness erupted in Alyssa, who had been commemorating Katie's birthdays for 18 years. Taking pictures was the family's day-long pastime. They had connected easily and quickly. After Katie got back to her Dover home, they kept in touch. She then revealed something unexpected. She was moving to live with her birth parents in Henrico County rather than attending college. Kelly and Tony Fusco were devastated and taken aback. Although they were equally nervous, they had no choice but to let her go because she was 18. They could have done a better job of figuring out what caused the abrupt change in heart, but they chose not to. Since they'd first met, Alyssa had observed a troubling shift in Stephen. Abruptly, the 41-year-old started to express greater interest in his appearance. He shaved his beard, got new clothes, and let his hair grow out in a way that was popular with boys Katie's age. It was just the first of many warning signals, but Alyssa felt that he wanted to appear like a cool parent to impress his oldest daughter. Stephen had warned Alyssa for 20 years if she even considered leaving him. He was glad to proceed with the separation at this point. Soon after meeting Katie, the couple started sleeping in different rooms and divorce preparations were initiated. Alyssa was too preoccupied with her oldest daughter's arrival to consider the abrupt shift in circumstances. The idea of rekindling their mother-daughter relationship thrilled her. But it became evident after a few weeks that Katie's priorities had shifted. Katie was spending the entire day with her dad, while Alyssa was putting in long hours at T-Mobile. Though it was obvious that the father and daughter had a strong relationship, Alyssa started to worry that Stephen was deliberately working to turn Katie against her. After Katie had moved in for around 6 weeks, Alyssa found out one evening that Stephen had started sleeping on Katie's bedroom floor. Stephen violently retaliated against her and rushed out of the house when she confronted him. Why the truth of what was happening did not just click for her is a difficult concept to understand. Either way, Alyssa drew Katie aside and cautioned her about the darker side of her father. She informed her of the maltreatment she had experienced as a baby at the hands of Stephen. She was shocked when Katie brushed it off. It was time for Alyssa to move out. She expected Katie to join her 2 daughters, for whom she had been granted custody. Although she was taken aback when Katie decided to remain with her father, nothing could have prepared her for the revelations she would receive over the next few months. Alyssa's daughters returned from a weekend spent with Stephen and Katie in May 2017. Alyssa was unpacking her daughter's suitcase when she read something in her journal that made her stomach turn over. Her daughter is 11 years old. The young child had written about Stephen and her sister Katie's relationship. She had written, "Katie is my big sister and I love her," in her journal. I also adore how her breasts are smaller and she has some slender spots. However, how is it that she gained weight and became pregnant, and my dad refers to her as his baby? Was it he who got her pregnant? I can't believe my dad even calls her my stepmother. He even objects to my referring to her as her sister. My sister is Katie. In real life, she's just my sister, but she's most likely his wife now. Does she consider me to be a sister or a daughter? These days, Katie occasionally instructs me to shut talking. The diary also included sketches of Stephen as Satan. In one, she was screaming, "Stop Satan, get the F out," as she fled from him. A brief remark that said, "Wait a second, if he's Satan and Katie's human, then the baby will be half demon," was put beneath the photo. Alyssa was appalled to learn that Stephen had lured Katie into an incestuous relationship. For as long as she had thought, Stephen was brainwashing Katie against her, but she had never, ever expected that he would have a sexual relationship with his own daughter. She was ill to her stomach. He had introduced her other 2 children to the entire disgusting setup, and it was too much for her to handle. Alyssa recalls, "I started to become hysterical and I called him and I said, 'Is Katie pregnant with your baby?' He just said, 'I thought you knew we're in love.' So I started screaming. I was cursing him out. 'How could you? You're sick. She's a child.' Then she called police. During the ensuing investigation, police questioned Stephen, Katie, and Alyssa's 2 youngest daughters, but no immediate arrests were made. Alyssa hoped that Stephen would be arrested as a result of the investigation. However, the investigation is still underway. On July 20th, 2017, 43-year-old Stephen wed his 20-year-old daughter Katie in a lovely wedding by a lake in Parkton, Maryland. A fact, Stephen had lied on their application, claiming they were unrelated, so their marriage should never have been allowed. Katie's pregnant belly was visible through her form-fitting black outfit. Notable guests for the wedding included Grace, Stephen's mother of 72, and Katie's adoptive parents. Given that Katie was already significantly pregnant, they had come to terms with the peculiar and unsettling circumstances. Pictures of them with their kid and her biological father, who had wooed her and gotten her pregnant and now intended to live out the rest of his days with her, show them grinning. How had something like this occurred? Even though Katie knew he was her biological father, why had she accepted his advances? Most people get instinctively uncomfortable with the idea of incest, and almost all human cultures view it as forbidden. As evidenced by a recent study, people understood that inbreeding was undesirable as early as 34,000 years ago. Although it's still debatable, there are 2 states in America that still allow it. In spite of this strong distaste, there have been numerous high-profile cases of incest in the media in recent years. Stephen and Katie moved to a house in a cul-de-sac in Knightdale, North Carolina, just 20 minutes from his mother's house, and they started living openly as husband and wife after successfully eluding marriage regulations. On September 1, 2017, Katie gave birth to their son, Bennett Kieran Pladle, but the family's happily ever after was short-lived. After being detained in January 2018, Stephen and Katie were extradited to Henrico County to stand trial for incest and, in Stephen's case, for encouraging a minor's delinquency. After a month, Stephen was freed on a $28,000 bond with the stipulation that he not speak to Katie again. In addition, Katie was granted bail and told to return to New York to live with her adoptive parents. Bennett, their infant son, was placed in the custody of Stephen's 72-year-old mother, Grace. The contentious partnership made headlines.
20-year-old Katie Platel, who was also Stephen's daughter. She was adopted at birth by the Fusco family in Wingdale, New York. At 18, she wanted to find her birth parents. She did, even moving in with them and eventually sleeping with and marrying her biological father. Her mother moved out and called police.
You may recall that those individuals were the subject of an arrest here in Knightdale back in January 2018.
In remarks, Stephen's attorney maintained that Stephen had never coerced Katie into a relationship. Katie, 20, made an effort to reintegrate into her family's life in the interim. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she accepted a job cleaning her grandmother's home in Waterbury, Connecticut. She started to understand some of the decisions she had made after taking some time apart from Stephen to think things through. She called Stephen on April 11th to inform him that she wished to end the marriage. Her goal was to settle their differences amicably so that she could raise their baby, Bennett, in a healthy setting. However, Katie had no idea with whom she was interacting. After failing in his repeated attempts to get her to change her mind, Stephen came up with a new strategy for his family. In a black pickup vehicle, Tony Fusco and his adopted daughter Katie departed their Dover home on Thursday, April 12, 2018, heading to the town of Waterbury, where Katie was employed as a housekeeper for her grandmother. They had no idea that a man in a nearby Honda minivan was observing them. He turned and started to follow closely behind them as they pulled out of the drive. They stopped at an intersection a few minutes later. Several witnesses occurred to watch as the minivan came up alongside the vehicle and the man opened his window. There were a few automobiles on the road that morning. They watched as he took out an assault rifle with arrows, aimed it at the window, and emptied it into the truck's interior. The remains of Tony Fusco, 56, and Katie Platel, 20, were still belted into their seats when police arrived on the scene. They were instantly dead. Not too long after, the same minivan was discovered in Dover, New York, just across the state line. A man who had shot himself in the head was lying on the van's front seat. Naturally, that individual was Stephen Platel.
3911, address of the emergency.
Yes. My son just called me, and he told me oh my God, in North Carolina, he killed his baby, and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name? Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
He's not home. His wife broke up with him over the phone yesterday, and he told me, she's in New York, and he told me he was on his way. He called me last night and said he's on his way. He's going to bring the baby to her, and then he was coming back. And he just
Okay.
He said he killed his wife, he killed her father, and I can't even believe this is.
Another 911 call had, meanwhile, been made in the city of Cary, North Carolina, by Stephen's mother, Grace Platel. As soon as possible, police were sent to Stephen Platel's Knightdale, North Carolina, residence to check on him. The lifeless body of a baby boy was discovered by them, lying in the closet of an upstairs bedroom. It had been an asphyxia. On April 11th, Stephen had contacted his mother after hanging up with Katie to let her know he was picking up Bennett in preparation for their Skype conversation. The courts barred Stephen from communicating with Katie, but they did not prevent him from seeing his son, a mistake that would ultimately cost Bennett his life. Stephen's mom concurred. Stephen picked up the baby, took him home, and used a pillow to suffocate the 7-month-old child. He then drove the 600 miles to Tony and Kelly Fusco's house during the night, hiding the baby's body in a wardrobe. That morning, knowing they were going to Waterbury, he waited in his vehicle, ready to surprise her. Stephen called his mother on the way. I think it was 7 a.m. He informed her that he was halfway there and had made the decision to see Katie with the baby. He gave her one last call at 8:45 a.m., an hour and 45 minutes later. This time, he wanted her to know that he had shot Katie and her father Tony to death and killed his son Bennett. The killing sent shockwaves through the community. On April 21st, Katie, Bennett, and Anthony Fusco were buried in St. Charles Borromeo Church in Dover Plains, New York. Alyssa declined to attend, opting to avoid any additional publicity, but she did send flowers. Stephen and Katie Pladle's case is incredibly painful and thought-provoking. It throws light on the taboo topic of incest and its terrible aftereffects, which are frequently kept a secret and are rarely brought up in civil society. Please leave your comments below with your thoughts on this case. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you thought this case was fascinating. Additionally, press the notification bell to be informed whenever we disclose a new, disturbing case. Until we speak again, be careful and vigilant. You never know what might be hiding in the dark.